It was nearly 20 months ago when I first went to the city council and stood up in front of them and told them what in the world is going on. And it was at that meeting that this has come about, and we now have, I believe, over 400 members in the Quiet Skies Coalition, and it's growing. So after that, we formed our nonprofit organization and started down the path that we have gone down. The recent changes of this categorical exclusion that we have just received from the FAA in the last few days has been something that we truly, I don't think we anticipated was going to come. But now that we have it, we're looking deep into the holes that we know are there, and we're going to dissect it every way that we possibly can. And the beauty of this whole thing, and those of you who have been a member for a long time know that we had a hard time in the beginning and we were fighting with the city to get on board with this. Well, that has long been overcome because that was more difficult than fighting the FAA, frankly. But our relationship with the city today, and specifically our city manager, Brian Wilson, and our city attorney, Lisa Marshall, has been phenomenal. They have kept us abreast of every issue that is going on, and we're fully looped in. And the expertise that we have within the Quiet Skies Coalition is second to none. And by your support, backing us, we continue to work with them, and they know that we have a lot of expertise that they don't have, and not even the attorney with Denton, Matt Adams in San Francisco. He is welcomed anything and everything that we can do to help support the effort. So, we've just received this a letter from Matt Adams, and we're not going to be able to go into all the details with you tonight on what the steps are going to be, because frankly, we just don't know yet. But we do know that we have a 60-day window of opportunity to contest the CADX, and the city is on top of it. Matt Adams is on top of it, and we will be working with them. We really have this meeting tonight because I know you people have an awful lot of questions you like to have answers to, and we're going to give you the opportunity, a lot of this meeting, for you to get up and ask your questions. We will answer them the best that we possibly can, but I guarantee you we're not going to be able to give you all the answers you're looking for. But that's why the website is going to be so important for you to go there on a regular basis and see the data that we're going to supply to you. It gets very technical at times, and it just has to be that way. Walt Bala and myself, because of our aviation background, we speak aviation language, and we can sort out the BS in most cases, not all cases. But we will keep you looped in. We'll try to answer your questions tonight to the best of our ability. And so, that being said, I think John Parnas, who is the Vice President of Quiet Skies Coalition, I want John to talk to you about the legal side of this whole thing, because he's been working firsthand with the attorneys, and he understands it. I'm not going to try to get into that, but I think he will give you the broad brush on the legal side of this thing and where we stand, because I won't stand up here and tell you I think we're absolutely going to win, but I will tell you that I think that we have a tremendous opportunity to set an example of the abusive power that is being demonstrated here by the FAA and put them in their place, and we will be doing that. Before I hand it over to John, I want to talk to you about one other quick thing. Alaska Airlines, my former employer, Alaska Air Group, they are the perpetrator of this issue that we have today with the Q400s, because Horizon Airlines belongs to the Alaska Air Group. I've handled them kind of carefully over the last several months. They didn't want me to say negative things, and I love my airline, but I love my community more. And we see their airplanes, we hear their airplanes, and if the FAA starts up the flights again, it's going to become horrible. But I was told today by the city, we've been prodding the city to get Alaska Airlines back to the table. We had one meeting with them approximately 6 or 7 months ago, and they've been laying in the weeds, not responding. And we told them we needed them to come with solutions. They haven't done that. We're going to be asking them to come back to the table, and we're going to get tough with them to tell them that it's their responsibility to do something different with these flight patterns. Because the FAA is a regulatory agency, and they regulate the air traffic, but they don't design all the patterns, the flight patterns, the departures, the landing patterns. They control the airspace. But the airlines themselves are constantly developing new patterns, approaches, but they have to get the write-off. They have to get the FAA to sign off on new procedures. And we believe that Alaska Airlines has the ability to go to the FAA after we sit down with them and explain to them. We presented the FAA with multiple different ways to change the flight pattern rather than just turning them and heading 250. Totally ignored, along with all the rest of the almost 718 responses from citizens that wrote the FAA that just got blown off. Insignificant, non-significance, they said. But we believe that we will be having these meetings with Alaska Airlines, and they will be able to help us. And then we can have a press conference together and thank them for helping the community. I hope that's what happens. We'll know, in the next month or two, maybe, if they're willing to do that. So, John, why don't you come up? I'm going to give you the microphone, and you can talk about the legal side.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. My name is John Parnas. I live in Burien. About 20 months ago, I was in my basement watching TV, and having nothing better to do, I watched the Burien Community Access Channel, and there's Larry Cripe, our fearless leader, going to a community meeting at the City Council, talking about planes and noise and stuff like that. And I thought, who is this guy? I don't know this guy. Turns out he's my neighbor. I don't know. He lives like a block away from me, 2 blocks away. So the next day, I get in touch with Larry. I said, what the hell are you talking about? What's going on? And so one thing leads to another. We created a nonprofit corporation called Quiet Skies Coalition. And after numerous steps of encouraging the City Council to take on stronger interest with our issue, the City Council voted very strongly on a 6-to-1 vote to support litigation against the Federal Aviation Administration. That lawsuit was filed in an appeals court in San Francisco in February of 2017. And we believe because of that lawsuit, we have some leverage over the FAA to get positive results. Now, as Larry mentioned, we have recently received what he didn't expect, but some others expected to be the heavy-handed response from the federal government to say, basically, you have nothing, we have everything, we have all the money, we have all the experts, we have all the data, and you people don't matter. And that's sort of legalese for FU. Is really what the CADX boils down to. It's a big FU. And excuse me for being a little blunt tonight. I am a practicing attorney. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning. I've been working all day, and so I got home about an hour ago, and I changed into something a little more comfortable. So And Steve, you know what I'm talking about.
Got it.
Sorry. This guy right here knows what I'm talking about. So let me try to be very succinct about it, because the point is to hear your questions tonight and answer some of those questions about what we're doing and where this is going. We filed a lawsuit with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in February of 2017. And when I say we, I want to say the city of Burien did that, which is a huge commitment on the part of your city council, which really took leadership to own this issue. And since then, and I'll just echo this for what Larry said, the city manager and city attorney have been extremely supportive of our cause. So I want you to know that, because people these days are very cynical about politics and politicians and all that. But the reality is our city council has our back on this issue. And that's a really good thing. So, number one, keep that in mind. Number two, keep in mind that the legal issue with challenging the federal government on aviation issues is an uphill battle. It just is. You gotta understand that. Number three, and as we explained to the city council 14 months ago when trying to convince them to sue the federal government, we know it's an uphill battle, but this is our card. We need to play it. And the city council played the card, and it has had value. We have had value. The FAA stopped the 250 overflights precisely because of our lawsuit. Now, we're now at a point where the FAA has played its card. The attorney in San Francisco, Matt Adams, a very qualified attorney, who represents the city of Burien and Quiet Skies Coalition, is now evaluating what our options are for challenging that. It's a complicated legal process. All I can tell you is that we are studying that very hard and looking at what our options are for challenging that. And that basically is kind of the legal summary at this point. We are in a process of long-term challenging, a big agency. And we just have to keep fighting, is really what it boils down to.
Can I say one thing real quickly? Just over here?
Of course.
The other thing, what this really looks like to me is a case about cumulative effects. It's a rarely used, not really gone through in NEPA very often, but it could be a very powerful tool to say that you essentially have been nibbling at our airspace, you've just been doing this arbitrarily, and the cumulative effects, or death by many cuts, or whatever you want to call that, has exceeded a threshold that now puts it into an area that you've got to do something about.
Well, one of the things that the FAA hides behind is this rule. It's called the day-night rule that establishes a threshold for what noise really is. A plane could fly over your house, as it did today for me, and I'm looking at the plane, it's like, that's noise. But according to the FAA, that's not noise, because they have this system for...
But how did they set it up?
All right, but this is why... So just so everybody knows, the CADX document that we got about a week ago is a very complicated 51-page document with many attachments. And Walt Bala has been studying it very hard. I've been looking at it very hard. Our attorney in San Francisco is looking at it very hard. It's a very complicated document whose apparent aim, I think, is smoke and mirrors. Thank you. Is to make your eyes glaze over and get inundated with all this jargon. So our strategy, generally speaking, is to try to grasp 1, 2, 3 specific errors or arbitrary actions that are embedded in that document that we can go to court with, if that's appropriate. So,
Well, as Larry mentioned, everybody regards Alaska Airlines as the local friendly airline, but it's their planes that are doing this. That's the reality, is that these are Alaska Airline flights, Horizon flights. These are not Delta, it's not, United. It's these commuter flights, as far as the turboprops are concerned, that are causing the problem. And it's very much on our radar screen. If you look at it, to take our case to Alaska Air Group, we've been not exercising that card, if you will, very deliberately, because we've wanted to be strategic about how we do what we do and how we publicize our cause. But now that the FAA has sort of thrown the gauntlet down against us, it's quite possible that we will be encouraging all of us to be more vocal against Alaska and to try to bring them back to the table, because it's their planes, and as Larry mentioned, they have a lot of influence over FAA and
Thank you very much, Nancy. Nancy is one of our city council members who's doing a wonderful job giving us support.
I just wanted to answer the question that was just asked and the comment you made about aviation capacity. So last year, we realized as we were looking at the Sustainable Airport Master Plan that sea-tac had put together, that their estimates of growth were wrong. And we actually thank Sharon here, who's on our airport committee. They're estimating that by 2034 they would reach capacity, but it's more like it's 2025 that sea-tac would reach capacity. So we passed a resolution in City Council going to the governor, the legislature, the Puget Sound Regional Council, the King County Council to say, so who in the world is worrying about regional aviation capacity? Because there is no agency that's designated to do that. About 2 months after that resolution, the FAA came to the Puget Sound Regional Council and said, we want you to do a study that looks at regional aviation capacity. So PSRC has been tasked and has been funded by the FAA to look at how the regional airports, sea-tac, could more effectively work together, whether there's a need for a new airport. This is a really complicated discussion. But to think that in less than 10 years, sea-tac will essentially be at capacity, it is an absurd thought when you think about impact and economic development. So I just wanted to let you know that we were conscious of that last year. We took action on the council. It seems to have gotten some attention at the FAA and PSOC, and I think that study is like a 2-year study, so it's a step.
We're talking about noise pollution. There's a safety factor as they're closer into our community, but there's also a noise factor that is on my mind. And over the last year or so, there's been a change in planes inbound, maybe up around 20,000 feet, but they're still loud enough that I hear with all the windows closed and doors shut at the house. And it's a change from that rectangular pattern that they've always had. I guess what I'm talking about is maybe from Enumclaw to Cookaway, hang a right, northbound for southbound landings. Now they're cutting diagonally through that rectangle. And while it's not a lot of volume at this point, if they're increasing capacity or headed that direction, I can't see how that can get any less, but rather more than what we're experiencing right now. And whether or not that's part of our conversation or the narrative in our push.
sea-tac was not one of the original 15 cities in Next Gen, but they, to date, spent approximately $33 billion on that experiment, and it's a failure. We have hammered the FAA about that. They have tried to implement pieces and portions of Next Gen here at sea-tac, but the direction by the government was they had to implement it all at once. It couldn't be piecemealed in. but they were piecemealing it in. And then they said, well, we can only do it on the west side. We can't do it on the east side because of the constraints. So, again, it's just another example of the FAA trying to do things outside of the confines of the law that govern them. They are public servants that are supposed to be serving everyone, not serving the powers of the big airlines. So that part of the noise problem, though, is I don't have an answer for that today, but long term, that's got to be addressed.
So your question really taps into one of the main challenges that we struggle with as part of this, because this group came together over a very specific issue. But we quickly realized that any long-term, really durable solution involves a much more knitted together kind of connection with Des Moines, sea-tac, and other communities and other organizations. And so while we are laser focused on a very specific issue involving the turboprops, very much in the forefront of our mind is the fact that this is a long-term issue, that the city council has a role to play in terms of its investigation, its resolutions, its resources. Other organizations have a role to play. The next gen issue could dwarf this turboprop issue that sort of created us originally. And so you've tapped into a big issue, which is there's a lot out there, and we need to be mindful of that and stay focused. But we're nothing unless we get some victories and some wins in the short term. And that's why we're so focused on our little turboprop issue. We're not here for that issue alone. Yes, sir.
Well, thanks. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment and then a question. I've lived in the area for 22 years, first at Shorewood, now real close to Lake Burien here, and just having moved into the Lake Burien area since October, I hear jet aircraft daily. That's day and night. So I don't know if those are missed approaches or redirects or what. It's there and it's happening. We can't ignore it. And I know there's focus on the turboprops and the noise issue, but I'm wondering, there's also got to be an environmental issue too, because the jet exhausts spew carcinogens out their exhaust, and if they're vectoring over our cities and our neighborhoods, that's not good. And that's my concern.
Just believing Alaska Airlines that they may get rid of them, the Q400 issue may go away, and the FAA said, we will never fly jets over your city. They could engrave that in stone and stick it on the city hall, and I wouldn't believe them. And you shouldn't believe them either. Because they're that deceitful that they will tell you anything, and that's why being on top of making people accountable. That's what this is about. Making people within the FAA and inside our government accountable for their actions. When they're public officials, when they're elected officials, we can kick them out of office. But when they're public officials, they need to be held accountable. And that's what we have to do, and we need the backing of you folks to stay informed, get educated, and continue to support us, and tell your family, friends, neighbors, everybody to get plugged in and stay involved, and that's all we need help.
We use the gentle sticks first. We use the bigger sticks later, and if we have to protest outside a facility so that no one gets in or out, or they have a problem getting in and out, and the news cover, the helicopter, the Channel 4 helicopter will, circle overhead.
And my intent is if we get Alaska Air Group to the table, I intend to quietly tell them, look, you can either work with us or you're going to face the citizens, and if I have to march 500 people to Alaska's corporate headquarters with picket lines.
And would that be where it would be with the corporate headquarters?
It's in our planning strategy.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why stay plugged in. It's in our planning strategy.
Okay, thank you.
I want to know, does the FAA, as part of their KTEX issuance, do they use any noise, like sound monitoring information collected from the port sites? The reason I ask is because I live in this vast hole that I think we're all living in, which is there are two sites that collect noise information there's a lot of them. There are two of them that are germane to our issue north and west of the airport. One of them is at Cedarhurst Elementary School, which is on 132nd east of 509. Another one is at Sylvester Middle School, which is at 162nd. That leaves a 30-block zone. And I'm in that zone. I think most of us are probably somewhere in that zone. I think if we did an overlay of the two sites that are collecting this noise information versus where we're all experiencing the noise, we'll see similarities. I see planes fly over my house, and I don't think it makes a blip on anything that the port's monitoring.
I manage the sound insulation program at KCIA, which is going through BFI. And what I know about noise monitoring, we did substantial amounts. And yes, the KTEX document contains some very recent noise modeling they've done. And one very important fact that they disclosed, which sea-tac officials will not disclose, is that their Part 150 study that they just completed for 2013 through 2018 is already out of date. Well, we knew that. We knew that. Our ears told us that. So they're 51% greater. The volume of operations is 51% greater than what they published. That runs through the end of this year. So that's why we know that the volume of noise is much greater than they projected. And I truly believe they knew that at the time. The FAA did some noise modeling for this KTEX exclusionary document. They don't say where they measured or which noise monitoring stations were used, but I suspect it was in the Cedarhurst area. They did it for 60 days, which is not a bad sampling. But what the end result is that their conclusion was that Cedarhurst is in the 45 decibel day-night level noise contour. And that's not sufficient to qualify it for sound insulation program, which would be the windows, doors, and attic insulation for people. But understand they only modeled those flights, not the entire increase of the operations at sea-tac. And that's the other thing you need to talk to your neighbors about, is if we don't put pressure on the port to redo and be more accurate this time on their Part 150, it's always a catch-up. It's always a catch-up. Their last 150 only modeled noise on the third runway, not the other two runways. So their own documents are so outdated that they're not reasonable, and it's not reasonable to expect that noise mitigation is going to happen anytime soon until they do that new noise model.
Okay, thank you. I guess just to follow up, I think if the port had an additional monitor somewhere in the zone that we're all freaking out about, they wouldn't be able to legitimately send us a document that says, you guys aren't experiencing noise. Because I live by the Fred Meyer, so I'm not in Cedarhurst. I bought a very cheap house and fixing it up. This is a big pain in my butt. And to be told that I'm not experiencing it, as you referenced earlier, is just a non-starter with me and my family. I am experiencing this, and it's one of the reasons that I really am not enjoying picking the house that I picked.
So, one comment. I believe some Port of Seattle representatives are here tonight, and they can answer your questions if they would be willing to do so. So if you want to participate in the meeting, Port of Seattle, we're happy to hear your voice. Number two, the monitoring situation. I hear you, and whether you live near Fred Meyer or near the Merrill Gardens or near my favorite taco place on Ambom or anywhere in between. We're all getting bombarded by the same bullshit. Okay? It is bullshit. And the problem with noise monitoring is that the FAA's model for what matters for noise is not based on noise monitoring on the ground. It's a computer model, okay, that is not based on real data from what you and I hear. It's based on this 65 decibel day-night model that sets the bar very high for what matters. So the game's kind of rigged. It just is.
Governor Inslee and our 2 U.S. senators, I would give anything to have a 15-minute conversation with our governor.
You want accountability, shine a light on this. Shine a light on that's what the press is.
You had on your, one of your slides that one of your action items might be to reach out to the Port of Seattle. Is that on your agenda? And what specific remedy do you think they might be able to provide you?
Well, we've had conversations with the port, and that's where the finger pointing starts. So the port points the finger at the FAA and say, it's their responsibility, it's not ours.
Then I have a comment for city council members and so on. I am astounded that the council members from the cities in this area have not banded together to engage and create some pressure on the port. You guys should all have a fund where you have full-time lobbyists in Olympia to wrest control away from the port. But when you go to each of the cities, it's laughable. Why you guys can't unite on this issue is just beyond me. Thank you.
Well, I will address that same issue right there. Yeah, Brian Wilson, our city manager, is here, and I'm going to let Brian address that question, and I think that he's the absolute right person to address that, because that process has started, and it's well on its way.
Thank you, Will. I want to showcase an example of where that collaboration, because that is, where's that citizen? I just want to recognize. That was, I understand what you're saying, and we have taken steps on the direction of City Council to do just that. And one example of that is that there's currently a sustainable airport master plan that the Port of Seattle is initiating for all the growth that's taking place, both currently and what's projected in the future. This process is substantial, and what has happened is that we have formed an interlocal agreement between the cities of sea-tac, Burien, Normandy Park, and Des Moines, and we are going to address that sea-tac airport master plan as a collaboration to have a stronger voice. We are also in communication with our neighboring cities about the impacts of this. So the council has authorized funding for this, as well as every of the other cities, and we will address this issue together.
Well, thanks. As a private citizen, and to the man who's fixing his house up next to the airport, the noise you might often hear is reverse thrust.
Well, I'm seeing that.
Yeah.
I've been there 3.5 years, and I'm familiar with the process of then making the changes to the 250 and the turbo process and over. I expected to hear some noise from the airport. I knew it near the airport, I understood that. But I never expected it was planes over my house. When shopping for a home, I looked at the maps. I studied historical data about where these planes fly and where they don't. And I specifically showed the house. It was not being able to fly. It wasn't moving. And
exercise to me was a similar thing. And they measure the airplane's noise footprint on an approach, takeoff, and then climb. And there's no measurement for the noise made when they land and use reverse thrust for 20 seconds. You cannot dispatch a commercial airplane using reverse thrust to calculate the landing distance or how much runway you're going to need. The dispatcher can't use it. It's got to be off the books. So when they use reverse thrust, that's an option. And it strikes me as funny, reports put in a note that nobody sees and the pilots never hear about, that you're not supposed to use reverse thrust during certain hours at night. And, you know, there's a thought in my mind that someone should be out there talking to these crews, the airlines, and saying, hey, give us a break. You'll get more landing spots if you keep your engines quiet when you land at night, because they're not necessary for the braking. And my final comment is, Copenhagen, over in Denmark, you know what they say? You don't use reverse thrust, period, you don't come here. Only for emergencies. And I'll let it go at that, because, you know, the message is clear. You know, we're getting stepped on because people think that they can do it. And my other thought is, what would it be like if the whole town of Burien decides to go for a ride through sea-tac Airport on a Friday afternoon? That speaks. Nothing else, you know, what the hell.
Well, speaking of noise, I do understand what he's saying. I used to live on 140th and 24th, which was on the other side of the airport. And part of the problem was, of course, that was before they had the stage 3 requirements, so the noise was a lot worse than it is today. And of course, on Sunday mornings, everybody likes to sleep in, but for some unknown reason, at sea-tac, they like to do engine tests, like 6 o'clock in the morning, and these things go on for a half hour. You know, these things are revved up halfway up. And the other day, for some unknown reason, I think there has been a change because of the wind patterns. There was weeks where you really heard the engines from these planes from sea-tac way over here, and that's not normal. But one day I did get woken up because they were starting to have these engine tests at sea-tac at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, you know, I can understand they're running a business, they got things to do, but like if you want to go out and mow your lawn at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're going to get complaints. And usually it's between 8 in the morning to 11 at night. You know, if you have your stereo on past 11 at night, you're going to get a knock on your door. So, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. I think what part of the problem is listening to all of this is that in the old days, noise was a definite factor for a lot of cities with airports because of jets. And the airlines had to abide to abatement rules. So when they took off, they had to cut their power down or they had to climb out at a faster rate. But I don't think sea-tac is one of the cities that are doing that. And so it goes well beyond Seahurst. It goes, you know, anybody who lives on the flight path is going to notice these things. And it's very possible that you guys may have to fight even in a stronger mode to have these airlines abide to having these abatement laws.
My name's Terry Plum. I'm part of the coalition. And I've heard a couple of times tonight something that us guys are you guys. The coalition is all of you and us. And without your help in the future, we're not going to be able to keep going. We do need your help. We need your financial help. You've gotten a little handout tonight that tells you how to contribute. If you have some time, we definitely need your time. All you have to do is give us an email with your name and perhaps what you're interested in. If not, we will be happy to figure out some way to use that time. But us is you also, so it's all of us. It's not just the 3 or 4 people you see standing in front of you.
Sorry, just to follow up on what Larry's saying about fundraising, now that the CADX bomb has sort of dropped on us, and we face an uncertain future in battling the federal government, I want to go back to what this gentleman said in terms of fighting local players. Every dollar that you commit to us is going to help us in our efforts to take on the two primary local people, agencies, actors, who can take care of our immediate problem right away, which is the Port of Seattle and Alaska Airlines. And I guarantee you that if we don't get what we need out of the FAA, there will be pickets, and there will be advertisements, and there will be publicity, and there will be noise against Alaska Airlines in particular, but that costs money. And everybody's got to step up to help us fund that. Thank you.
I heard several people wonder why all of the cities haven't gotten together, so I think we need a little history lesson here. My name is Kitty Milne, and I was the mayor of Burien 20 years ago when we fought the third runway fight. We had an airport cities coalition of all the airport cities, plus Federal Way and Beacon Hill and West Seattle, and you name it. We spent over $10 million of your tax money fighting the third runway. We were told it was only going to be used during inclement weather. So that's a good indication of how much you can trust what the Port of Seattle is telling you. Our fight is not with Alaska Airlines. Our fight is with the Port of Seattle. They are the elephant in the room. They are the elephant in the state. They were told 20 years ago there were 12 sites identified for brand new airport locations. The Port of Seattle threatened every one of them and shut them down. So nothing has ever been done. Your state officials don't care about you. Your King County representatives don't care about you. The other counties don't care about you. So, folks, it's up to us. And we didn't do this last time, and we need to do this. We need to protest. We need to be in the streets and let people know what's happening. The issue is, nobody wants an airport in their backyard, folks. And we have one. And the Port of Seattle's plans are to double air traffic and commercial traffic, folks. And they're going to do that unless we stop. So we had rooms filled with twice this many people when we fought the third runway. So it's up to us again this time, and I hope we win. But I want you to know I'm not real positive. And there are cities all over the country who are fighting the same thing that we are. And I wish that we could make this a national issue with the FAA and trying to get something done.
Sorry. I wanted people to know that on the website I put up a couple of documents. Somebody had asked about the air quality issue. So we hear a lot about noise, and we can hear noise. Air, of course, is invisible. We are not sure what it is, but a lot of us see the soot accumulating on our properties, and some of us see the health effects of having lived here long term and what it can do to health. So I just want to say the history of it is that we had really high rates of lung illness, cancers, different types, especially respiratory types of cancers, throat, brain cancer was statistically significant. This was a survey done in the 90s. Now, we have statistically significantly higher rates of asthma to the north of the airport, which is primarily the landing pattern. So in what I put up on the website tells a little bit of the background and history of this issue, and don't be afraid of it. It seems complicated, but it's not. You got these ex-pollutants causing this amount of problems, and you've got people that are sick. you know, it doesn't take a genius to put 2 and 2 together. We got one major polluter and we got sick people living right by it. So, you know, what are you going to do? The other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm appalled at the way the FAA has treated us. But even more so, I'm appalled at the way the Port of Seattle has stood on the sidelines and been completely quiet and let the FAA bully us around with their foregone conclusions and their plans. And what I want to know from Marco is this how you're going to treat us during the SAM process?
Agree with you more. That was well said. Two things I would say. One is, I hate to say you guys and us guys, but somebody's got to put together a draft action plan. What I've heard tonight is a multi-pronged attempt on the port, FAA, Alaska Airlines, and for each of those individual constituents, there should be a plan of attack. I shouldn't say attack, but there should be a plan of action on what would we like to try to accomplish, what are our goals, and how are we going to accomplish that. And I hear you on money, you need the money. The other thing I wanted to say real quickly was the Eagle thing is, I think, a red herring for you. As much as I dislike these entities, they probably went through the correct legal process under their Endangered Species Act. That's what Eagles used to be on. And when they do that, all these airports, they get what's called a take. If they exceed that take, we don't know what that is, but that says you can kill 4 eagles a year or 2 eagles a year, whatever. We don't know if they comply with that or not, but the people to talk to are the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service down in Olympia, Washington. And they actually are easy people to talk to if we can get a cohesive, you know, this is the things we want to talk about.
Be a FOIA request?
You don't need a FOIA request. You will need a FOIA request for anything you need at FAA, but with Fish and Wildlife, I think, you know, if you showed the effort and could get on somebody's schedule, then I think they would just talk to you reasonably. But you're not going to get a lot of headway. I mean, it's the... But there's other species out there, like peregrine falcons and stuff like that, that are also covered under the Endangered Species Act, that you may be able to do it. You may be able to get more mitigation out of the port for that. And I agree with everybody that we should be going after the port. They're a public entity. They hate to be embarrassed in public, and I think we can do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I was just wondering, why don't we picket Alaska Airlines sooner than later and start that and put the pressure on it instead of wait till it's a foregone conclusion. And then also, I mean, talking about birds and everything, Audubon Society, has anyone contacted them to see if they're interested in anything? Or, I mean, the more people you got on board, the stronger we become. So anyway, I'd look at everything.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I know that, like I said, we're working in conjunction with this city, and we don't want to get too far out in front of our action against the Alaska Air Group, but when they come to the table, we're going to crank the heat up, and they're going to know that they either have a choice, get on board or face what's coming, and they won't leave the table until they understand that.
Larry, I thought I might just say something about the Burien Airport Committee, because our city council did form an airport committee. It has 3 council members, it has 3 business leaders, and it has 3 citizens in the community. Larry serves on it, Sharon serves on it, Jimmy serves on it, Debbie serves on it, and a number of other folks. And we meet once a month. It's a public meeting. You're welcome to come. It's on Tuesday nights. We have a multi-pronged approach, and that is what prompted me to stand up here and let you know that this exists. At the last meeting, we said we were going to continue to think about what the lawsuit is. We were waiting to hear from our attorney, and the council will make that decision. We are going to try to figure out how to get Alaska Airlines at the table. We are talking about picketing or somehow protesting. We are talking about putting together new noise contours and emission contours. And let me see. one other, actually John's a member of the committee too, so we have a number of our airport committee folks here. But we are trying, and this is an advisory committee to the council. So if this committee comes forward with resolutions for the council, specific recommendations on what the council might do in terms of its lawsuit activities, these are things that this committee can do. Government works through committees and task forces, and that's the way we try to get input. But just to let you know, this is actually the only council advisory committee that's been created that has council members and members of the community. So this is an important issue to us. We are paying attention, and we will continue to do so.
I don't know about you, but I live with my phone, and one of the main contacts that I have in it is the airport noise complaint phone line. So every morning, I hate to admit it, but when I leave to go to work, I sniff the air and I listen. And if either is off, who do I call? Immediately, the airport noise complaint line. I don't know if that's doing any good, but I feel it can be the squeaky wheels.
Absolutely.
At least it's the easiest thing to do. It doesn't require typing a letter. It doesn't require showing up to a meeting. But it's a quick call that you can make while you're waiting for your car to warm up. The number is...
It's on our website, readily apparent.
But since I have it handy, 800-826-1147. 800-826-1147. It's the airport noise complaint line, posted apparently by the Port of Seattle, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, God, I was going to stand behind you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Mata is here, and Mayor Mata, I want, if you want to say a few words, I want you to feel free to do it, okay? Because he and I had some discussions, and I believe our councilor, Mayor Mata, has got our back on this thing, and the council members too. So I don't want to get up here and talk too much. The thing I want you to know is, if you get a group of people together, I don't care if it's 8 or 10 people in your community, and you have people around you that weren't able to come tonight, and you get a small group gathering of people, you call me. I'll come over and sit down with you. And the more people we can empower that way, if you will hold small public meetings, I will come and sit with those people and help educate so we can empower them to be part of what's going to be needed as we go forward. And that's where you can help. That's where everybody in this room knows somebody that can hold a meeting, pop a couple bottles of wine and cheese, and weather's going to get better. I will come to your home and I will sit down and help people learn what's going on here. Okay?
Okay. So I just wanted to mention that there's actually a meeting tomorrow night from 6 to 8. There is something called The Start, and it is a community advisory panel board at the port. And John is representing the city of Burien. Terrence represents the city of Burien. Your city manager, Brian Wilson, will be there. I represent the city of Des Moines. And so what's unique about tomorrow night is that there's going to be a panel discussion, and we're going to have representatives from the FAA, representatives from the port, representatives from the airlines, because all too often what happens when we ask questions, they do this. Nobody will be accountable for who's in charge of what. There is public comment. Unfortunately, the public comment is at the beginning of the meeting. I've actually written to the Port of Seattle and requested that the public comment be after the panel discussions, because your input is valuable and they will not move it. It's still at the start of the meeting. So I recommend if any of you come, you request that you reserve your public comment time till after the presentation so you too can engage. There are comment cards. Unfortunately, after the first meeting, the janitor threw out the comment cards, so I don't trust their process, because I still don't know what the public had to say at the first meeting. And there's food. So if you want to get engaged, You can start with tomorrow night at the airport, at the stakeholder community meeting, or it's not community, stakeholder advisory meeting. Today I went to the Port Commission meeting to give testimony about the proviso, and I won't get into that, but we asked for a study that was outside of the port's thumbprint, blueprint, and unfortunately the port redlined our study and they changed it. We don't get what we want. They removed quality of life. We'll no longer study quality of life, and we'll no longer be able to study the impact on crime, and that's thanks to the Port of Seattle. But while I was there today, it was standing room only. It spilled over so much they had to open up conference rooms because the taxi cab drivers are being directly impacted by unfair regulations with Uber and Lyft. If we could get citizens to show up like the taxi cab drivers have been showing up, it is meaningful impact. I cannot begin to tell you how many people were there. It was going to be easily 2 hours of public comment. So that's where we need to start, is by showing up and filling those seats. What time? I beg your pardon? Where is it exactly? Okay, so at the port, in the international, in fact, do you have the START meeting up on your website, or you can go to Quiet Skies Puget Sound?
We have it on the Facebook page.
It's on the blog.
Okay, so I know a lot of people aren't on Facebook.
It's on the B-Town blog.
Okay, it is on the B-Town blog. If you can access the B-Town blog, you'll get directions to the START meeting tomorrow night. If you want to just email me, it's quietskiespugetsound@gmail.com, and I will send everybody the agenda and the directions on how to get there. Parking is validated. Like I said, there's food. But what's most important is for citizens to start showing up. I beg your pardon? Your email? My email is quietskiespugetsound@gmail.com. And then in the future, maybe we can get Quiet Skies Coalition to start publishing the START meetings.
Yes, that's right, Sheila. Quiet Skies Puget Sound, Sheila and her group of people, and Steve Edmondson, who's here, and Scott Schaefer, these people have been invaluable in supporting us. We initially started QuietSkiesCoalition.net. Sheila and her organization came up with Quiet Skies Puget Sound, and we, maybe someday in the future, as we get more and more organizations together, we'll all organize under one Quiet Skies Puget Sound. We've had those discussions. It's not going to take place now, but maybe in the future as we grow in strength and numbers. And their work at Quiet Skies Puget Sound has been invaluable. Their website and their Facebook pages are incredible. They're way ahead of us in the technical end of things. We're trying to get better. And Susan Pleco, Susan has been our communications director. She's doing a great job and handling things. So we're going to get better at communicating with you as we move forward. And so, Jimmy, you got the...
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, good evening. Yes, I'm your mayor here in the city of Burien. And I got to tell you that stories are very important. I seen a little slide over here where it says, write the stories of quality of life and what you're going through. Visiting homes, I was right under that flight path, and I just, in my mind, going, this is unjustifiable, right? And so, I know that you have my commitment, and I know the other city council members feel strongly about, how do we push back? And having the experts at the table is very important. I want to thank Quiet Skies for the work. I know that the other mayors of the other cities are concerned about how do we push back. And yes, every once in a while, it's important that we pick up a bullhorn, and we let people know how we feel. And so you got my commitment to be there. I do pretty good with that bullhorn, so and I'm ready for that. But one of the things that we talked about at the committee, that airport committee, is figuring out what other alliances we can build. So one of them was SAGE. So if you do have some recommendations, I would urge you to come to the meetings. It's always important to get perspectives, different perspectives. People united will never be divided. So we really need to work really diligently and hard to bring people together and explain to young folks, right, how important this is for their livelihoods and their future. I think it's very important, and asking the school district, what are they doing with education for our children to go to school? They also are a partner in our community, so should look at that, council members. And I was just meeting with some of our council, our congressional leaders, sending letters to them. I talked to Patty Murray about this issue in Burien and how it's concerning to our community members here. So I know that they've been, they communicate back, but at the end of the day, if there's no pressure, there's no change. Thank you.
To ask. So is Alaska the only airline that we're talking about here that is impacting us?
About 95% of the Q400s belong to the Alaska Air Group today.
Got it.
And those are the perpetrators of the airspace that are causing the problem, and that's the fight of the petition in court is over the 250 term, which is primarily the Q400s.
Because I'm certain that one of the jackass lobbyists, Airlines for America, I'm sure they'll be sticking their nose in any time any citizens get upset with whatever airlines are doing. They seem to make sure that they get a handle on something like that. The other thing I wanted to know, so we live up behind Highline Hospital, so when the planes are, the jets and the turboprops come right over, so they're flying right over the hospital, Highline Hospital. Does Highline Hospital have any reservations about the noise and the pollution and noise pollution and hazardous to all of our health? We're healthy people, not in the hospital. What about people in the hospital? And it's the same with the schools. If they fly right over Highline High School, and Sylvester Middle School is one of the sound check stations. I know they fly right over that. So all of those public facilities that we all support with our tax dollars, are they being impacted as negatively, or do they have anybody to advocate for them in that way? And that's all I have.